The stars were cold and endless in this part of space. No human colony existed within 50 light years. No trade ships passed through these empty lanes. There was only darkness, silence, and the slow drift of ancient rocks floating between the stars. In this forgotten corner of the galaxy, a single warship moved through the void. The HSS Beekdu was a heavy cruiser, one of humanity's finest vessels. Its hull was dark gray, covered in armor plates thick enough to stop most weapons. Along its sides, rows of railgun turrets waited in silence. At the front, a massive plasma lance glowed with blue light, ready to burn through anything in its path. Captain Kang Taehyun stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a tall man with short black hair and calm eyes that never showed fear. He had served in the fleet for 20 years. He had fought pirates, stopped rebellions, and protected human colonies from every threat. Now he commanded the Beekdu on a simple patrol mission along the edge of known space. The bridge was quiet. Only the soft hum of machines filled the air. Blue lights from the control panels cast shadows across the faces of the crew. Everyone worked at their stations, checking systems and watching screens. Lieutenant Commander Park Yuna sat in the first officer's chair to the captain's right. She was a woman in her 30s with sharp features and even sharper intelligence. She had been Taehyun's second in command for 3 years. They trusted each other completely. When Taehyun needed someone to think of things he might miss, Yuna was always there. At the weapons station, Shin Nari watched her screens with cold focus. She was young, only 28, but she had the eyes of someone much older. She never smiled during duty hours. Her job was to destroy enemies, and she took that job very seriously. Her fingers rested near the firing controls, always ready. Chief Engineer Gominyu was not on the bridge. He was deep in the ship, surrounded by reactors and power systems. Minyu was a genius with machines. He could make the Beekdu's engines run faster, its shields hold longer, and its weapons hit harder than any engineer in the fleet. He talked to the ship like it was a living thing, and somehow the ship always listened. At the communications station sat Beek Jiwoo. He was the youngest member of the senior crew, only 25 years old, but his skills with signals and codes were amazing. He could find hidden messages in static. He could break through any jamming. Right now, he was listening to the empty void, searching for anything unusual. Navigator Choi Hana plotted their course through the stars. She was a quiet woman who rarely spoke unless necessary, but when she did speak, everyone listened. She knew this region of space better than anyone. She could find paths through asteroid fields that no computer could calculate. She could predict where enemies would appear before they arrived. The patrol had been quiet for 3 weeks. Nothing unusual, no threats, just endless space and routine checks. Some crews would become lazy in such conditions, but not the crew of the Beekdu. Taehyun made sure of that. They ran combat drills every day. They kept their skills sharp. They stayed ready for anything. It was during the middle of a normal shift when everything changed. Jiwoo suddenly sat up straight at his station. His eyes went wide as he stared at his screens. Numbers and patterns scrolled across the display, and his face turned pale. "Captain," he said, his voice tight with surprise, "I am detecting an energy signature. It is massive." Taehyun turned to look at the young officer. Location: bearing 275, distance approximately 400,000 kilometers. Sir, this reading is unlike anything in our database. The energy levels are off the scale. Yuna leaned forward in her chair. Could it be a natural phenomenon, a pulsar or a quantum storm? Jiwoo shook his head slowly. "No, Commander, the pattern is too regular, too organized. This is artificial. Something is generating this energy on purpose." Silence fell over the bridge. Everyone understood what that meant. Out here at the edge of human space, there should be nothing. No human stations, no human ships. If something artificial was creating that much energy, it was not human. Taehyun's expression did not change, but inside his heart beat faster. First contact. The possibility that humans were not alone in the universe had always existed. Scientists had debated it for centuries, but no one had ever found proof. Until now. "Hana," he said calmly, "set course for the energy signature. Approach speed, slow and careful. I want us ready to retreat if needed." Hana nodded and her fingers danced across her controls. "Course plotted, Captain. Time to arrival at current speed, 40 minutes. Nari, bring weapons to standby. Do not power them fully yet. I do not want to appear hostile." "Understood, Captain," Nari replied. Her hands moved across her station, and deep within the ship, weapon systems began to wake from their sleep. Taehyun pressed a button on his chair. "Minyu, this is the captain. We may have a situation developing. I need the reactor ready for full power on my command." Minyu's voice came back through the speaker, calm and steady. "Already on it, Captain. Whatever you need, the Beakdu will deliver." The ship changed course and began moving toward the unknown signal. Everyone on the bridge felt the tension in the air. They had trained for combat against pirates and rebels. They had never trained for this. No one had. Yuna moved closer to Taehyun and spoke quietly. "Sir, should we send a message to command? If this is what I think it is, Earth needs to know." Taehyun considered her words. She was right, but sending a message would take time. The signal would need to travel across vast distances. Help could not arrive for weeks or months. Whatever they found out here, they would face it alone. "Prepare a message," he said. "Include all our sensor data, but do not send it yet. I want to know what we are dealing with first." Yuna nodded and returned to her station. Her fingers began typing the report that might change human history. The minutes passed slowly as the Beakdu moved through the darkness. On the main screen, the energy readings grew stronger. Whatever was out there, it was big, very big. Jiwoo worked constantly trying to understand the signals. Then his face changed. He looked confused, then worried. "Captain, I am receiving something else now. Communication signals. Hundreds of them, all using the same unknown language." "Hundreds?" Nari asked, her voice showing rare surprise. "Can you translate?" Taehyun asked. Jiwoo shook his head. "The language structure is completely alien, but I can tell this much, Captain. These are not exploration signals. These are military communications, command structures, fleet coordination." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Fleet coordination meant ships, many ships, and military meant they were built for war. Taehyun stood perfectly still. His mind raced through possibilities, strategies, and outcomes. His crew looked to him, waiting for orders. They trusted him to know what to do. He took a deep breath and made his decision. "Continue approach, all stations to yellow alert, and someone get me a visual. I want to see what we are dealing with." The Beakdu sailed forward into the unknown darkness. Its crew was ready. Whatever waited for them out there, they would face it together. They were human. They did not run from the unknown. They ran toward it. The main screen flickered to life, and the bridge of the Beakdu fell completely silent. Every person stopped what they were doing. Every eye turned to look at the image before them. What they saw would stay in their memories forever. Space itself was tearing open. A massive rift, glowing with purple and white energy, stretched across thousands of kilometers. It looked like a wound in reality, edges burning with impossible light. And through this wound, ships were coming. So many ships. The first vessels emerged like shadows given form. They were unlike anything human engineers had ever designed. Their hulls were not metal but something organic, like the shells of massive sea creatures. Patterns of bioluminescent light pulsed across their surfaces, green and blue and red, moving like blood through veins. They had no sharp angles, no straight lines. Everything was curved and flowing, grown rather than built. More ships followed, then more. The count on Jiwoo's screen climbed higher and higher. 50 ships, then 100, then 150. The numbers kept rising until they finally stopped at 217 vessels. An armada, a full invasion fleet. Captain Tihyun watched the screen without moving. His face showed no fear, but his mind worked at incredible speed. 200 ships against one. The odds were impossible. Even the finest human warship could not survive such numbers. "Jiwoo," he said, his voice still calm, "are you able to understand their communications yet?" The young officer was sweating. His hands shook slightly as he worked. "The computer is trying to build a translation program, Captain. The language is very complex. Wait, I am getting something. They are broadcasting on an open channel. I think they want us to hear them." "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice filled the bridge. It was deep and cold, full of authority and arrogance. The computer translated it in real time, and the words made everyone's blood run cold. "Attention, unknown vessel. I am High Warlord Dral of the Vekari Dominion. You have witnessed our arrival. Your world and your species now fall under our authority. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. We have conquered 47 species across this galaxy. None have resisted successfully. You have one standard cycle to submit. Surrender your ship, your crew, and your world coordinates, or be destroyed." The message ended. Silence returned to the bridge. Yuna turned to the captain. Her face was pale but determined. "Sir, we should retreat immediately. We need to warn Earth. We need to bring the full fleet." Nari spoke up, her voice hard. "They asked for world coordinates. If we run, they will follow. They will track our path directly to human space." "She is right," Hana added quietly from her station. "Our jump trail would be easy to follow. They would find our colonies within days." Tihyun understood. Running was not an option. It would lead the wolves directly to the sheep, but fighting was suicide. One ship against an armada was not a battle, it was an execution. He looked at his crew. These people had served with him for years. They trusted him with their lives. Now he had to decide how to use that trust. "Jiwoo, open a channel to their flagship." The communications officer hesitated. "Captain." "Do it." Jiwoo pressed the controls and a signal went out across the void. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the main screen changed. An alien face appeared before them. High Warlord Dral was terrifying to look at. His skin was gray and thick, like armor. His eyes were completely black without any white. Sharp ridges covered his skull, and his mouth was filled with teeth meant for tearing flesh. He sat on a throne of dark metal, surrounded by other Vekari officers who watched with cruel amusement. "The prey wishes to speak," Dral said, his translated voice dripping with contempt. "How amusing. I have not heard a species beg in quite some time. Speak, creature. Beg for your survival." Tihyun stepped forward so the camera could see him clearly. He stood straight, his shoulders back, his chin raised. He showed no fear, no weakness. "I am Captain Kang Tihyun of the human warship Baekdu. I speak for my crew and for humanity. We do not accept your terms." Dral laughed. It was an ugly sound like bones breaking. "You do not accept? Little creature, you have no choice. Look at what faces you. 200 warships. We have burned entire civilizations. We have turned planets into ash. What can one small vessel do against the might of the Vekari Dominion? We will fight." The laughter stopped. Dral leaned forward on his throne, his black eyes studying the human before him. "You cannot be serious. This is not bravery. This is stupidity." "Perhaps," Tihyun replied, "but we are human. We do not surrender to threats, we do not bow to tyrants, and we do not give up our home coordinates to anyone." The alien warlord stared at him for a long moment. Then a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "I have conquered 47 species. Some fought, most did not, but all of them fell. You think you are different. You think humans are special. I know we are." Dral slammed his fist against his throne. Then you will die knowing you were wrong. I will destroy your ship, capture any survivors, and pull your world's location from their screaming minds. The Vakari Dominion does not negotiate with insects. The screen went dark. Immediately, the bridge exploded into activity. Alarms began to wail. Red lights flashed across every station. On the tactical display, enemy ships were breaking formation, moving to surround the Bikdu. They are launching their vanguard, Nari reported, her voice now cold and focused. 50 ships approaching. They are powering weapons. Time to engagement, Tihyun asked. 8 minutes. 8 minutes. In 8 minutes, they would be fighting for their lives. 8 minutes to prepare for the impossible. Tihyun pressed the ship-wide communication button. His voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every station of the Bikdu. All hands, this is the captain. By now you have all seen what we face. An alien armada here to conquer humanity. They expect us to run. They expect us to surrender. They expect us to die quickly and quietly. He paused. They do not know humans. In the engine room, Minyu stopped his work to listen. In the medical bay, doctors and nurses gathered around speakers. In the weapons bays, soldiers gripped their stations tighter. We are going to fight. One ship against an armada. The odds do not matter. What matters is that we are the only thing standing between these invaders and our home, our families, our species. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today, we make them remember us forever. He released the button and turned back to his crew. They looked at him with fire in their eyes. Fear was there too, but it was buried beneath something stronger. Determination, pride, the human refusal to give up. Yuna, send that message to command now. Include everything. First contact, hostile species, invasion fleet. Tell them the Bikdu engage the enemy. Yes, Captain. Her hands flew across the controls. Nari, bring all weapons to full power. I want everything we have ready to fire. With pleasure, sir. Her voice carried a hint of dark satisfaction. Minyu, give me maximum power. Push the reactor as hard as you can. Through the speaker, the engineer laughed. Captain, I have been waiting for a moment like this my whole life. The Bikdu is about to show these aliens what a human warship can do. Hana, I need evasion patterns, something they cannot predict, something impossible. The navigator's fingers were already moving. I have been calculating since we first saw them, Captain. I have routes they will never expect. Tihyun looked at the tactical display. 50 ships were closing in. Behind them, over 150 more waited. It was the most uneven battle in human history. But humans had faced impossible odds before. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. They had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. They did not die easily. They did not surrender quietly. The Vakari Dominion was about to learn that lesson in fire and blood. All stations report ready, Yuna announced. Captain Tihyun took his seat at the center of the bridge. He looked at the approaching enemy fleet one more time. 200 warships that had conquered 47 species. Now they would face the 48th. Humanity fights back today, he said quietly. Then louder, all weapons prepare to engage. Helm, execute evasion pattern on my mark. The first alien beams began to charge, glowing with deadly energy across the void. Tihyun's eyes hardened. Mark! The first alien energy beam streaked across space, a brilliant lance of green light aimed directly at the Bikdu's bridge. It should have hit. By all calculations, by all the laws of war the Vakari understood, that beam should have burned through the human ship and killed everyone inside. It missed. The Bikdu moved at the last possible second. Thrusters fired in a pattern so complex, so fast, that the ship seemed to jump sideways through space. The beam passed harmlessly through empty void where the ship had been just moments before. On the Vakari flagship, officers stared at their screens in confusion. Their targeting systems were the best in the known galaxy. They had destroyed thousands of enemy vessels. They never missed. "Fire again," High Warlord Drow commanded. "All forward ships destroy that vessel." 20 ships fired at once. 20 beams of deadly energy converged on the Biktu from multiple angles. There was no escape, no possible way to avoid them all. Hana's fingers moved like lightning across her controls. The ship rolled, pitched, and yawed in movements that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size. Thrusters fired in sequences that made no logical sense. The Biktu danced between the beams, slipping through gaps that should not have existed. Not a single beam touched the hull. In the engine room, Minyu shouted commands to his team. Power flowed through the ship like blood through a heart. Every thruster, every system, every piece of equipment worked at perfect efficiency. He had spent years learning this ship, understanding it, improving it. Now that knowledge was keeping them alive. On the bridge, Nari watched her targeting computer lock onto the nearest enemy ship. The Vakari vessel was large, maybe 3 times the size of the Biktu. Its organic hull pulsed with sickly green light. Weapons ports along its sides glowed with charging energy. "Captain," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "I have a firing solution." "Take the shot." Nari pressed the trigger. The Biktu's railguns roared to life. Magnetically accelerated projectiles shot from the barrels at nearly the speed of light. The rounds were simple metal, nothing fancy, nothing complicated. But at such incredible speeds, simple metal became the deadliest weapon in existence. The first round hit the Vakari ship's hull and punched straight through. It entered from the front and exited from the back, leaving 2 massive holes in the organic armor. Atmosphere vented into space. Secondary explosions rippled across the alien vessel. The second round hit before anyone could react, then the third, then the fourth. The Vakari warship broke apart. Its hull cracked like an egg, and fire erupted from within. Escape pods launched in every direction, but it was too late for most of the crew. In less than 5 seconds, a vessel that had conquered entire planets was reduced to burning debris. Silence fell across the Vakari fleet. They had never seen anything like it. Their ships were built to absorb energy weapons, to regenerate from damage, to survive almost any attack. No species had ever used projectile weapons against them. The concept was considered primitive, outdated, useless. But the humans had taken those primitive weapons and made them deadly beyond imagination. The speed, the power, the accuracy of those railgun rounds was beyond anything the Vakari had ever encountered. Captain Tihian did not wait for the enemy to recover from their shock. "Nari, pick your targets, fire at will." The weapons officer smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of a predator. "Yes, Captain." The Biktu turned toward the next enemy ship and fired. Another Vakari vessel exploded, then another, then another. The vanguard of 50 ships broke formation in confusion. They had come expecting easy prey. Instead, they found a nightmare. Beams of alien energy filled the space around the Biktu. The ship twisted and turned, avoiding most of them. A few struck the shields and the ship shook from the impacts, but the human shields held. They flickered and sparked, but they held. Minyu's voice came through the speaker. "Shields at 80%, Captain. These aliens hit hard, but our boys can take it. Keep dancing and we will keep fighting." On the Vakari flagship, High Warlord Drow watched in growing disbelief. 10 of his ships were already destroyed. 10 ships lost to a single enemy vessel. It was impossible. It should not be happening. "What is wrong with your weapons?" he roared at his officers. "Why can you not hit them?" "High Warlord, their movement patterns are not random. They are calculated, but the calculations are beyond our prediction systems. Their ship is smaller and lighter than ours. It can move in ways our vessels cannot match." "Then overwhelm them. Launch all missiles. I want that ship buried in fire." Dozens of Vakari ships launched their missiles. Hundreds of organic projectiles streaked toward the Bikdu, each one carrying enough explosive power to crack a small moon. Jiwoo saw them coming on his sensors. "Captain, massive missile barrage incoming. Count is 400 and rising." 400 missiles. Even the Bikdu could not dodge that many. Even the best pilot in the galaxy could not weave through such a storm. But Nari was already prepared. Point defense systems online, switching to defensive fire. Smaller guns across the Bikdu's hull came to life. They were designed exactly for this moment, to create a wall of metal between the ship and incoming threats. Thousands of rounds per minute filled the space around the human warship. Missiles exploded before they could reach their target. One after another, they detonated harmlessly against the curtain of defensive fire. Brilliant explosions lit up the void like fireworks, but none of them touched the Bikdu. When the barrage ended, the human ship was still there, still fighting, still killing. Taehyun pressed his advantage. "Hana, take us into their formation. Get us close." "Captain," Yuna asked, surprised. "Close combat against 50 ships. They cannot hit us at range. At close range, they cannot fire without hitting each other. Their numbers become their weakness." Hana understood immediately. Her hands moved, and the Bikdu surged forward at maximum speed. The ship dove into the heart of the enemy formation like a wolf among sheep. The Vakari panicked. Their ships tried to turn to track the human vessel, but they were too slow. The Bikdu weaved between them, using enemy ships as shields. When one Vakari vessel fired at the human ship, the beam missed and struck another Vakari vessel instead. Friendly fire spread chaos through the formation. Ships crashed into each other trying to avoid collisions. Commanders screamed orders that contradicted each other. The perfect coordination of the Dominion fleet collapsed into madness. And through it all, Nari kept firing. Every shot found a target. Every railgun round punched through an enemy hull. The kill count climbed higher and higher. 20 ships destroyed, then 25, then 30. On the bridge, the crew worked in perfect harmony. Jiwoo jammed enemy communications, isolating ships from their commanders. Hana found paths through the chaos that no one else could see. Minyu kept power flowing to every system that needed it. Yuna coordinated everything, making sure nothing was forgotten. And Captain Taehyun commanded it all. His voice was steady, his orders clear. He saw the battle like a game of chess, always thinking 3 moves ahead. He knew where the enemy would be before they did. He knew where to strike, when to dodge, how to turn every situation to his advantage. The vanguard of 50 ships had been reduced to less than 20. The survivors broke and fled, retreating toward the main fleet. They had come to crush a single enemy. Instead, they had been crushed themselves. The bridge crew of the Bikdu allowed themselves a moment of relief. They had won the first round, but they knew the real battle was just beginning. On the flagship, High Warlord Drow stared at the tactical display with murder in his black eyes. 32 of his ships destroyed by one enemy vessel. The shame burned through him like fire. He had conquered 47 species. He had never lost a battle. Never. Until now. "All ships," he commanded, his voice shaking with rage. "Full assault. I want that human ship destroyed. I want its crew brought to me alive so I can tear them apart with my own hands. The full might of the Dominion will erase this insult from history." The remaining 185 Vakari warships began to move. They formed into a massive sphere of death, surrounding the lone human vessel from every direction. There would be no escape this time. No clever movements. No gaps to slip through. The real battle was about to begin. Captain Taehyun watched the enemy fleet surround them. He felt no fear, only a cold determination that filled his entire being. "All hands," he said over the ship-wide channel. "Prepare for the fight of our lives. This is what we trained for. This is our moment. Make it count." The Bikdu turned to face the coming storm. and humanity answered with fire. The Vakari Armada closed in from every direction. 185 warships formed a sphere of death around the lone human vessel. Energy weapons charged across the fleet, creating a glow that lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. High Warlord Drow gave the command, "Fire everything." Space became hell. Thousands of energy beams converged on the Biktu, missiles launched by the hundreds. The entire might of the Vakari Dominion focused on destroying one small ship. Hana's hands moved faster than thought. The Biktu rolled and spun, diving and climbing through a storm of fire that should have been impossible to survive. Beams passed within meters of the hull. Missiles exploded so close that the ship shook from the force. The first hit came 30 seconds into the attack. An energy beam struck the rear shields and broke through, burning a hole in the outer hull. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded the bridge. Section 7 venting atmosphere, Yuna reported. Emergency bulkhead sealed, 3 crew members trapped. Can we reach them? Tihyun asked. Negative, the corridor is exposed to space. 3 people, 3 members of his crew, dead in seconds. Tihyun felt the loss like a knife in his heart, but he could not stop. He could not grieve, not yet. Keep fighting, he ordered. Another hit. This time the port side took damage. Armor plates peeled away into space. Systems flickered and failed. The lights on the bridge went dark for a moment before emergency power kicked in. Minyu's voice came through the speaker, strained but determined. They got one of my secondary generators. I am rerouting power. You will have weapons, Captain, but I cannot promise how long. Give me everything you have, Minyu. Whatever happens, keep us fighting. Until my last breath, Captain. The Biktu was hurt, but it was far from dead. Nari kept firing, her railguns tearing through enemy ships with deadly precision. Even surrounded, even damaged, the human warship continued to destroy its enemies. 50 Vakari ships destroyed, then 60. The debris field around the battle grew larger with every passing minute. But the enemy had numbers. For every ship the Biktu killed, 10 more took its place. Energy beams found their mark more often now. The shields were failing. Hull breaches spread across the ship. Crew members died at their stations, killed by explosions or exposure to the void. In the medical bay, doctors worked without rest. The wounded kept coming, carried by their comrades through smoke-filled corridors. There was not enough medicine, not enough beds, not enough time, but no one stopped. No one gave up. On the bridge, Yuna studied the tactical display with desperate focus. They were killing the enemy, but not fast enough. At this rate, the Biktu would be destroyed before it could finish the job. Captain, she said, moving to his side, we need to change our strategy. Trading shots is not working. We are running out of ship. Tihyun nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. They needed something dramatic, something unexpected, something crazy. His eyes found the enemy flagship. It was the largest vessel in the fleet, hanging back from the main battle. From there, High Warlord Drow commanded his forces. The flagship was the brain of the Armada. Every order, every coordination, every tactical decision flowed from that ship. The Vakari use a hive-linked communication system, Tihyun said slowly. Their ships respond to commands from the flagship. What happens if we take out the flagship? Yuna's eyes widened. Their coordination would collapse. Ships would be left without orders. They might even retreat. Or they might go berserk and attack everything in sight, Nari added grimly, including each other. Tihyun made his decision. Either way, it is better than dying slowly out here. Hana, plot a course for the enemy flagship. Maximum speed. Take us right down their throat. Hana looked up from her station. For the first time there was fear in her eyes, but there was also trust. Trust in her captain, her crew, her ship. Course plotted, Captain. It is a suicide run. Maybe, but we are going to make it count. He pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, this is the captain. We are making a direct assault on the enemy flagship. This is our chance to end this battle. All power to weapons and engines. Shields are secondary. Today we show these aliens that humans do not know how to die quietly. The crew responded with a roar that echoed through the ship. In every section, on every deck, men and women prepared for the final charge. They were scared. They were wounded. But they were human, and humans never gave up without a fight. The Beakdu turned toward the enemy flagship and accelerated. Thrusters burned at maximum power. The ship shot through the enemy formation like an arrow, leaving destruction in its wake. Vakari vessels tried to block the path. The Beakdu cut through them. Railguns blazed continuously. The plasma lance fired again and again, each shot burning holes through enemy hulls. Ships exploded around them, but still the human warship pushed forward. On his throne, High Warlord Drow watched the small human vessel charge toward him. He could not believe what he was seeing. They were not running. They were not surrendering. They were attacking. "Stop them," he screamed. "All ships, stop them now." But the Beakdu was too fast, too unpredictable. It weaved through the concentrated fire with movements that defied understanding. Hits were scored. More hull breaches opened. More crew died, but the ship kept coming. 5,000 kilometers from the flagship. 4,000, 3,000. Nari armed the nuclear torpedoes. These were humanity's most powerful weapons, reserved for only the most desperate situations. Each warhead carried enough destructive power to crack a planet. The Beakdu had 4 of them. "Torpedoes ready, Captain," she reported, targeting enemy flagship. 2,000 kilometers, 1,000. The flagship's point defense systems opened fire. Energy beams struck the Beakdu repeatedly. The front armor shattered. Sections of the ship tore away. The bridge shook so hard that people were thrown from their stations. But they were close enough. "Fire torpedoes," Tihyun commanded. Nari pressed the trigger. 4 nuclear warheads launched from the Beakdu's tubes. They streaked across the void at incredible speed, too fast for any defense system to track. High Warlord Drow had 1 second to realize what was happening. 1 second to feel fear for the first time in his long life. The torpedoes struck the flagship's hull and detonated. The explosion was blinding. A sphere of nuclear fire expanded outward, consuming the flagship completely. The massive vessel cracked open like a broken shell. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure. Reactors went critical. Weapons stores ignited. The flagship of the Vakari Dominion, the symbol of their power and conquest, became a rapidly expanding cloud of debris. High Warlord Drow died instantly, vaporized by the nuclear fire. His last thought was simple and terrifying. The humans were not prey. They were something else entirely. The effect on the Vakari fleet was immediate and catastrophic. The Hivelink system went dead. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves alone, cut off from commands. Some captains tried to take control. Others froze in confusion. Many simply panicked. Vakari vessels began firing wildly, hitting friend as often as enemy. Ships collided in the chaos. Formations dissolved into madness. The perfect war machine of the Dominion fell apart in seconds. On the battered bridge of the Beakdu, the crew watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart. "It is working," Yuna breathed, disbelief in her voice. "They are destroying each other." Tihyun allowed himself a small smile. "Nari, help them along. Target any ship that still looks organized." "With extreme pleasure, Captain." The Beakdu, barely holding together, continued to fight. Its weapons never stopped firing. Each shot pushed the Vakari fleet deeper into chaos. Ships began to flee. Those captains who could think clearly saw that the battle was lost. They turned toward the rift and ran, desperate to escape the nightmare that one human ship had created. 70 ships destroyed, 80, 90, 100. The survivors did not stop to fight. They did not try to regroup. They ran with all the speed their engines could produce, leaving their dead and dying behind. The battle was over. The Biktu floated among the wreckage, surrounded by the remains of over 100 enemy ships. The human vessel was barely recognizable. Its hull was torn and burned. Entire sections were open to space. Fires still burned in a dozen places. But it was alive. Against all odds, against every logical calculation, the Biktu had survived. On the bridge, Captain Tihyun looked at his crew. Yuna was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. Nari's uniform was burned. Hana sat slumped at her station, exhausted beyond measure. Jiwoo was crying, tears of relief streaming down his face. They had done the impossible. Minyu's voice came through the speaker, weak but triumphant. "Captain, I do not know how, but we are still here. The engines are shot. Half my systems are dead, but we are still here." Tihyun nodded slowly. "That we are, old friend, that we are." He pressed the ship-wide communication button one last time. "All hands, this is the captain. The battle is over. We won." The cheers that echoed through the ship were the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. The rift slowly closed behind the fleeing Vakari ships. The purple and white energy faded, and the wound in space healed itself, leaving only stars and silence behind. Of the 217 ships that had emerged with conquest in their hearts, fewer than 30 escaped. The rest were debris, scattered across millions of kilometers of empty space. The Biktu drifted among the wreckage like a ghost. The ship that had done the impossible was barely alive. Power flickered through damaged systems. Air leaked from 100 small holes that the emergency seals could not close. In some sections, the only sound was the hiss of escaping atmosphere. Captain Tihyun walked through his wounded ship. Every step showed him the cost of victory. Walls were blackened by fire. Floors were covered with debris. He passed crew members working to seal breaches, tend to wounded, and restore power to critical systems. They were exhausted, injured, some barely able to stand, but they worked anyway. Of the 300 crew members who had started the battle, 87 were dead. Another 112 were wounded. The medical bay was overflowing. Doctors and nurses who had been working for hours continued without rest, saving lives through skill and determination. Tihyun stopped at each station, speaking with his crew. He thanked them for their courage. He mourned with them for lost friends. He promised that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. In the engine room, he found Minyu sitting against a wall, covered in grease and burns. The engineer looked up with tired eyes that still held a spark of life. "She held together, Captain," Minyu said, patting the floor of the ship. "I told you she would. The Biktu does not give up." "Neither does her crew," Tihyun replied. "Can you get us moving?" Minyu laughed weakly. "Give me a few hours. The jump drive is destroyed. We will have to limp home on sublight engines. It will take weeks, but yes, we can move." "Then get started. I want to bring everyone home." On the bridge, Yuna was already working on the after-action report. Her face was pale from blood loss, but she refused to leave her station until the work was done. When Tihyun entered, she looked up with a tired smile. "We did it, Captain. I still cannot quite believe it." "Believe it," he said, taking his seat. "We faced the impossible and won. That is what humans do." Jiwoo had restored long-range communications. The message they had sent to Earth Command before the battle had already traveled across the stars. Now it was time to send another. Tihyun composed his words carefully. They would be remembered for centuries. They would be studied by historians and recited by children. He needed to get them right. "Earth Command, this is Captain Kang Tihyun of the HSS Biktu. First contact with alien species confirmed. The species identifies as the Vakari Dominion, a hostile empire that has conquered 47 other civilizations. They entered our space with an armada of 217 warships, intent on conquest." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Biktu engaged the enemy alone. The battle lasted 4 hours and 37 minutes. We destroyed over 180 enemy vessels, including the enemy flagship and High Warlord Drow, the commander of their forces. The remaining enemy ships retreated through their rift, which has now closed. Humanity stands. He ended the recording and sent it. Across the vast distances of space, the message began its journey to Earth. It would arrive in days. When it did, everything would change. 3 weeks later, the battered Biktu limped into the outer reaches of human space. A fleet of 20 warships had been sent to meet them, alerted by their message. When the rescue fleet saw the condition of the Biktu, they could not believe their eyes. The ship was more wrecked than vessel. It should not have been able to fly. It should not have been able to fight. But it had won. The crew was transferred to hospital ships for treatment. The wounded were cared for. The dead were prepared for burial with full military honors. The survivors became heroes before they even reached Earth. News of the battle spread across human civilization like wildfire. The story of one warship against an alien armada captured the imagination of billions. People who had never cared about the military suddenly looked to the stars with pride. Children played games where they were Captain Tihyun or Weapons Officer Nari. The crew of the Biktu became legends while still alive. But the survivors themselves felt different. They did not feel like heroes. They felt like people who had done what needed to be done. They had fought not for glory but for survival, not for fame but for their homes, their families, their species. 2 months after the battle, a memorial was held on Earth. The names of the 87 crew members who died were carved into a monument of black stone. Captain Tihyun stood before it, looking at each name. He remembered their faces, their voices, their courage. Lieutenant Commander Park Yuna stood beside him. Her wounds had healed, but the scars remained, both visible and hidden. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. Far across the galaxy, the survivors of the Vekari fleet returned to their empire. They brought with them a warning that would change their civilization forever. The Dominion had conquered 47 species across thousands of years. They had believed themselves invincible, chosen by fate to rule the galaxy. That belief died with High Warlord Drow. The survivors told their leaders what they had seen. A single ship, smaller and lighter than their weakest vessels, had destroyed their armada. The humans moved faster, aimed better, and fought harder than any species they had ever encountered. They did not surrender. They did not flee. They did not know how to give up. The Vekari Dominion declared humanity off limits. No ship would enter their space. No contact would be made. The humans were marked as the most dangerous species in the known galaxy, a threat to be avoided at all costs. Word spread to other civilizations, to species the Dominion had conquered and species that had hidden from their wrath. A new power had appeared, a power that had done what no one else could. Some civilizations began to seek contact with humanity. They sent careful messages, diplomatic probes, offers of trade and alliance. They wanted to know these strange beings who could defeat empires. Others watched from a distance, waiting to see what would happen next. Humanity was new to the galactic stage. Their first performance had been spectacular. What would come next? Back on Earth, the Biktu was placed in a museum. The damaged ship would never fly again, but it would never be forgotten. Millions of people came to see it, to walk through its scarred corridors, to stand on the bridge where Captain Tihyun had commanded the impossible victory. Tihyun himself was promoted to admiral. He spent his remaining years building a fleet that could protect humanity from any threat. He trained new captains, designed new ships, and prepared the species for its new role in the galaxy. Yuna became the captain of humanity's first diplomatic vessel, carrying messages of peace to those who wanted to listen and warnings to those who did not. Nari continued to serve in the fleet, eventually commanding her own warship. She never lost her cold precision, but those who knew her well sometimes saw her smile when she thought of the battle that changed everything. Minyu became the chief designer of human warships. Every vessel built after the Biktu carried improvements he had developed, lessons learned from that desperate fight. Hana trained the next generation of navigators. Her impossible maneuvers were studied and taught in every academy. No pilot could match her skill, but many tried. Jiwoo created new communication systems that could translate alien languages in seconds. His work would make first contact with peaceful species possible and warn humanity of hostile ones. They had all been changed by what they experienced. They had looked into the face of extinction and refused to blink. They had proven that humanity, alone and outnumbered, could stand against the darkness. Years passed. Humanity grew stronger. New ships joined the fleet. New allies joined their cause. The galaxy came to know humans as survivors, fighters, and builders who would never back down from a challenge. And in every corner of explored space, a story was told. A story of a single warship facing an armada. A story of courage against impossible odds. A story that reminded the galaxy of a simple truth. Humans were not prey. They were not victims. They were something the universe had never seen before. And the galaxy would never forget the day they learned that lesson. The story of the Biktu became a legend, and legends, unlike ships, never die.